Welcome to At Home with Music, and today we're going to introduce the Renaissance. The Renaissance music period covers the time from around 1400 to 1600. And what I'd like to do in this video and the next one is to look at some of the features of Renaissance music, talk about some of the composers, and we'll talk about the instruments used, and how it laid the foundation for the musical periods that followed. The word Renaissance, or if you like, you can pronounce it Renaissance, but I'm going to say Renaissance. It's a French term meaning rebirth. It was an age of discoveries and exploration and political and social upheaval. Those of you who know church history know that the Protestant Reformation took place during the Renaissance period, and that had a big impact on life in the Western world. But there was also an increase in what we would call humanistic thought, and that challenged the supremacy of the church. The Renaissance period, of course, was a great time of development in music and in the arts, and there were new styles and techniques, and composers often drew their inspiration from ancient cultures like ancient Greece and Rome. When you study the music of the Renaissance period, you find often that it is divided into sacred music and secular music. Early Renaissance music was dominated by the Latin Mass because, of course, at that time, the Catholic Church reigned supreme. And so a lot of the sacred music that was written were polyphonic masses, motets in Latin. This was music meant to be used in the church. Secular music was very dependent upon the courts. They could finance and support musicians, and there were many secular songs written during the Renaissance period, such as the Chanson, or Chanson, however you want to say it, or a Madrigal, or the German Leid. Chansons were lyric-driven French songs, and these were written during the late medieval and Renaissance period. They're kind of the result of the evolution from the songs of the troubadours and the trouvères. And then madrigals, that's vocal music that was written during the Renaissance, and it's usually unaccompanied, and you could have 2 to 8 voices, sometimes 3 to 6 voices in the writing. And unlike some songs where you're singing the same tune for every verse, a lot of madrigals feature different music for every stanza of the lyrics. And so the composer would try really hard to express the emotions contained in the words of the poem that was being sung. And a German Lied, well, a Lied is a term to describe setting poetry to classical music. I encourage you to check out the links included in the description of this video so you can hear some examples of madrigals and Lied and so on. As the Renaissance period progressed, secular music began to push the boundaries a little bit more and began to lay the foundation for what we would call functional harmony. In other words, songs that were in major and minor keys rather than being based on modes, as music was during the medieval period. Secular Renaissance music was mostly vocal, but instrumental music also developed instead of just being the accompaniment for vocals or dances. Early Renaissance composers mostly came from northern France or the Low Countries because of the court system that supported musicians in those regions. And then in the late Renaissance period, Italy became an increasingly important music center. Some of the most famous Renaissance composers were people like Guillaume Dufay, John Tavener, Thomas Tallis, Palestrina, William Byrd, and Monteverdi. Now, don't confuse Monteverdi with Mantovani. If you don't know who Mantovani is, check with your parents or your grandparents. So there's a quick introduction into the music of the Renaissance. In the next video, we'll take a few moments to look at some of the prominent Renaissance instruments, because the Renaissance was a time of great invention. And so there were several new instruments that came to the forefront during the time of the Renaissance. And so we'll look at those in the next video. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I encourage you to like the video, subscribe to the channel. That helps the channel a lot. and I'll talk to you in the next one.